Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio. And now, here's our host, Dr. Vanessa Anceloni.
Welcome, dear listener, to Kardec Radio. Today we are here live at the Chantilly, Virginia studios directly to you. And we are going to talk about something that happens to all of us, the afterlife. Afterlife is part of life, actually. And we have the honor to have here with us Mark Ireland, the author of several books, including Soul Shift and the most recent one, Messages from the Afterlife. A beautiful book that is something for us to meditate about, read, and talk to friends. It's a bereaved father's journey in the world of spirit visitation, psychic mediums, and synchronicity. Mark Ireland has much to share with us also about his father, who was a psychic medium. But before we open the line to talk to Mark and learn from his experiences and much about what he shared in his latest book, Messages from the Afterlife, we're going to share with you that this coming April, at the end of April, the last Saturday of April, opportunity with friends or make new friends and talk to spiritists from all over the United States. It's going to be the 8th U.S. Spiritist Symposium. This year, it's going to happen in Chicago, Illinois. Something you shouldn't miss, because it's an opportunity to really reinforce what we know, what we feel, and know that there are many people out there really tuned into this lifestyle. It's not about the belief simply. It's about a new way of living our lives. It's beyond any religious concept. It's about the way we live and lead our lives. So it's going to happen at the end of April. And you can get more information just going to www.spiritistsymposium.org. By the way, pretty soon the Spiritist magazine in its new issue is coming about. And when you see it, you can read it online free of charge through its either PDF form, digital form, or you can buy your own copy, the hard copy, that will be sent to your home by going to our website, thespiritistmagazine.com. And once you're there, it's going to direct you to buying the hard copy of the latest issues or the previous ones through our partner, HP Mag Cloud. Just go to thespiritistmagazine.com and get to know more information about it. Dear listener, when we talk about life after life, we're talking about life. By the way, Jules, thank you so much. Good morning to you too. And remember, dear listener, you can always talk to us here live, either by calling us at the toll-free number 858-769-4705 or going to the Blog Talk Radio chat room at Kardec Radio and making your comments, asking your questions. And of course, if you're listening to this on demand after the show, you can always send an email to us. Just go to kardecradio@gmail.com. We'll be happy to listen from you. Or go to kardecradio.com. We have a contact form, and we'll be happy to answer to any of your questions. Right now, when we talk about Allan Kardec, in the Spirit's book, Allan Kardec extensively asked the illuminated minds of the beyond about the afterlife. And they explain that the afterlife is actually the true life. A true life that is what we have here and much, much more. So we have cities in the spiritual realm. We have hospitals, universities. Can you believe when you are at rest, sleeping, you can go to these places in the spiritual realm. Visit friends. You can also be visited by good spirit doctors, therapists that can help you and help your family. It's the concept of the intelligent sleep. All you need to do is to ask for an opportunity to be cared for, to be instructed. As the Spirits say in the Spirit's book, in the very chapter, Sleep and Dreams, the Spirit of St. Augustine explains, we often, when we sleep, we go to the spiritual realm, get instructions from the good spirits. So, dear listener, talking about the afterlife is talking about life, because we are spirits, and at this very moment, no matter if your body is seated, laying down, standing up, driving a car, whatever you are doing, don't forget, you are spirit. The physical body is being used by you, but you are not limited to your body. You are much more than that. You are an immortal soul. We're going to talk about this and much, much more in true accounts about the beyond, about messages that were received from the afterlife. Mark Ireland, the author, is here with us at Kardec Radio. To kickstart and setting the tone of the program, here we have a beautiful message, Doorway to Life. Let us listen to this, because this is from the book and CD Living and Loving by the medium Divaldo Franco. The spirit author is the acclaimed, adored, loving Joanna De Angelis. After this message and the break, Mark Ireland is here with us.
The Doorway to Life.
Throughout centuries, death has been so related with taboos, grotesque beliefs, mystery, and superstition that people were led to fear it and to consider it as the inevitable end of life. Even the religious views of death were mistaken. According to their tenets, the dead were severely judged and had to face eternal damnation if condemned, or eternal salvation if absolved. People then learned to consider death, which is a natural biological event, as a supernatural, much-feared moment, when conversely it is a doorway to real life. Science has demonstrated that nothing ends. On the contrary, everything in nature undergoes a process of transformation. Why then would we end after physical death when everything else changes from one form to another? In all civilizations, mediumship has demonstrated that life continues after death. The spiritualist doctrine made clear the divine laws that govern all life. With spiritualist teachings, survival after death becomes an important assertion. It also discloses the spirit world, demonstrates that spirit preexists the physical body, and also that the spirit world is the dimension where spirit comes from before birth and returns to when life in the physical body ends. With death so unmasked, immortality could be understood and accepted. We reap what we sow. Our happiness or misfortune is a consequence of our very acts. However, no matter what our life conditions are on account of our actions, the presence of love in our lives is the most comforting demonstration of divine fatherhood. It helps us to atone for our errors and proceed with our spiritual ascent. Death is a natural phenomenon. Think about death as you carefully plan your physical life, and program your physical life considering the changes that death will bring into your life. To die is to change one's vibratory condition, but death in itself will not change your emotional reality. If a dear one has preceded you in the journey of death into real life, thank God for his or her liberation. The physical body is like a prison, but it provides us with the opportunity to learn and accelerate our evolution. Death is freedom. However, you must make your life so useful that your death may lead you into radiant joy. Think with serenity and joy in your heart of your loved ones who have departed from the physical body. Do not torment yourself imagining all the things you could have done for them. or of all the words you could have said to them. Love them tenderly. Think of them knowing that they hear you, they see you, and partake of your joys and your concerns. If you really love them, do not send them depressing mental messages. On the contrary, let them know that you are happy, so that they who also love you may rest in peace and wait patiently for the time when you will join them when your time comes. Together you will continue your evolution, resuming the bonds of love that death has temporarily interrupted but not severed. Pray for them, cherish them in your memory, and honor them doing whatever good you can. Whoever saw Jesus nailed to a humiliating cross and suffering the agonies of death would never imagine that later, crowned by divine light, he would rise from the dead and confirm to mankind the great reality of immortality. We must remember, however, that before the morning of resurrection, he had to face the evening of Calvary. Death is the doorway to life, a door through which we all must pass on our way to eternal happiness.
We will return to our program after these messages.
New release, Liberation. In this compelling narrative, Andre Louise emphasizes the work of high-order spirits in the effort to convert the spirit Gregorio to the good, an effort that culminates with the unforgettable re-encounter with his mother, herself a highly evolved spirit, wherein he surrenders to the irresistible call of love. The book also contains information on how unhappy spirits act as they try to involve incarnates in their wiles. The spirit author tells of the intercession of high-order spirits on behalf of human beings, demonstrating the divine compassion that grants to all the blessed opportunity to free themselves by means of study, labor, and persevering service in the practice of the good. Buy your copy today at www.ediceiofamerica.com.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
Want Spiritist books for your children? At Edison of America, you will find a collection of them. From the best-selling book, Our Father, in which the Spirit Mei through Chico Xavier brought countless poems, stories, and folk tales based on the Lord's Prayer, to the beautiful and educational collection by the author Adelson Sales on Back to School and many others. Buy your copy today at www.edisayofamerica.com.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
If you missed out on previous shows, no worries. We have an on-demand sections of all previous shows and interviews. Go to our website, www.kardecradio.com.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Spiritism for Everyone, the online study of Spiritism. This year with the in-depth study of the book Genesis by Allan Kardec. Join us every Wednesday evening through the web from any computer or mobile device, no matter where you are in the U.S. or the world. Spiritism for Everyone is free, open to all, and requires no registration. For more information, go to www.spiritus.us. Spiritism for Everyone is a program of the United States Spiritist Council.
And now we return to our program.
Dear listener, we're so happy we're talking about our lives. Our lives as a continuity. Just to know that we keep on living, it changes the perspective of our lives for sure. And it changes also the way we lead our relationships, because when one of us goes back to the spiritual realm before the ones connected to our daily lives, we know we are not dead, and hopefully they will know it too. So, is it easy to communicate with those who stay here? How does that happen? What is that type of experience? Well, mediums are people who actually have that that type of experience. And we have here with us Mark Ireland, who is the author of several books, including Soul Shift and the latest, Messages from the Afterlife. He has a lot to share with us, from the experience with his father, Richard Ireland, who was a psychic medium, to his very experiences as a researcher of consciousness survival. So here we have Mark Ireland, who lives in Scottsdale, Arizona with his wife Susan, where he works as an advertising executive. Thank you so much, Mark, for being with us at Kardec Radio today.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Mark, when we talk about the afterlife, for many people it's just second nature. It's for many people, but still, majority of people on Earth are afraid, and they resist to actually embrace the concept or even think about it. How did you get acquainted with this, and how did you embrace the research you do on consciousness survival?
Well, I don't want to state that I'm a scientist per se, but I've done research and done some investigations in conjunction with other people who are scientists. But this goes back to my childhood, actually, because of the father I grew up with. So I saw he had phenomenal psychic abilities and also mediumship abilities, and I saw these from the time I was a child. And so it instilled a lot of confidence in me that somehow, some way, that there was another unseen realm, that souls went on and existed after physical death, and that we could communicate with them, or some people could at least. And so as I grew up, I didn't necessarily follow my father's path. I took a more conventional one. Went to college, got a degree, went into the business field, got married and had kids, and just focused on my business. But it was really in my childhood that I first saw it. And then my youngest son passed. It was actually 10 years ago yesterday. And that kind of jarred me back into this field, to look at it under a new lens, and to really, I guess, carry forth my father's work in one way, but also to establish my own work, which was far more important than anything I'd done before in my life.
So you still work in your professional field, but you develop this research in your spare time.
Right, and I'm not really in the advertising field anymore per se, but I do. I am in the business world in a company that does marketing type work, and so I still have to pay the bills, and I haven't found. Book publishing is very rewarding, but it's not anything you can live on, at least not unless you're selling millions of copies, which I'm not there yet. But so I have to balance both things. But this is my true passion, and it's really about something you said early on. It's about giving hope to people and helping them understand there really is more, because, the culture that we live in here in the United States is in denial of death, and it's all focused on youth and staying young and pretending like death never happens. And as a result of that, people are not prepared. And when they lose someone passes on, transitions, I'd rather say, they don't know what to do, and they're totally lost in grief, and sometimes they even become suicidal. So it's a sad state of affairs. And even most of the traditional religions will just lightly touch on, ideas pertaining to the afterlife, but not really give enough substance there for people. And some of them come along with some baggage, like you said, like that's fear-related. So then people who take that seriously, then they worry about their loved ones. Well, did they make it to heaven or not, and those kinds of things.
Exactly. There is much of the unknown there. So one of the reasons possibly people just push it aside. But Mark, when you talked about your father, Richard Ireland, can you tell us more about his experiences as a psychic medium, and how that actually, you talked a little bit how it impacted how you were exposed since early childhood, but can you tell us more about your father?
Sure. Really, the breakout event for his family realized that he was different happened when he was only 5 years old. He was born cross-eyed, and so they'd taken him into the Columbus, Ohio Children's Hospital for corrective surgery on his eyes. And after the surgery was completed, they had his eyes cupped and bandaged so that he wouldn't tamper with them or touch them. and they had actually restrained him to a bed, but this nurse felt sorry for him and said, look, I'll let you up from the bed, but you have to promise me you will not, remove the bandages or mess with the dressing in any way. So he agreed to this, and then she went on her rounds and came back a while later, found him bouncing a ball against the wall and catching it. She thought, oh, my goodness, he's taken the bandages off, and then she saw that he hadn't. They were still on. And so she thought this was rather strange, so she called some other doctors to observe this, and then they tried some experiments. They put him in a bed and had one doctor stand at the foot of the bed and another calling out from the doorway and trying to see if he could detect who was actually standing in front of him, and he got it right every time. So that's when my grandparents realized that my dad was different. And then at the age of 12 or 13, he stumbled into a spiritualist church, and he had his first experience with other people who had similar abilities, and he was given a message from a medium at that time who gave to him a secret code name that a friend of his had that they had shared, and this is a friend that had just passed on a short time earlier. After that, then they did a circle, and my dad was asked to give messages to people. He'd never tried this before, but it just instantly worked for him. And so as he grew up, he didn't really take this on full force until he was about 17, 18 when he graduated from high school. And then he developed rather rapidly, and he also developed deep trance mediumship. So by the time I was born, he was a practicing, at that time, spiritualist minister, and then he went on to his own interdenominational church, which had a broader scope to it. But in addition, he went into the secular world because he felt it was important. There were a lot of people that would never set foot in any kind of a church that needed this understanding, needed their minds open to the possibility of the reality of spirit, and that we're not just a body, we are a soul occupying a body. And so he ended up initially demonstrating in different types of groups and business clubs and things, and eventually even nightclubs in Las Vegas and TV shows and all kinds of things. And he counseled people like Mae West, who I got to meet when I was 19, and a lot of other celebrities of that time frame, like Glenn Ford and Amanda Blake, who I met. She was Miss Kitty on Gunsmoke, if anyone remembers that show. It was rather remarkable, but I was just used to it. It was almost like I took it for granted, and not even realizing how gifted he was. It was just phenomenal. And what's super for me is in the last few years, I've had a lot of people approach me and give me personal cases that they had of experiences, and some of these I'm documenting and will be putting in future writing, but they're just phenomenal validations of his ability.
That's amazing. But you said it was so natural for you that you almost left it aside until something happened in your life. And then I
think that's how it goes sometimes in life. It's like we settle into a comfort zone, and it's not necessarily our path, and so something has to push us into our path. In this case, it was my son's transition, which is about as difficult a thing as you can imagine, and heartbreaking. But at the same time, I've come to view that as something that probably had to happen and may have been predestined to happen, because he was here as a teacher and is still teaching. He taught people around him how to live, because he lived in a very selfless way, in a very loving, non-judgmental way. And the people that knew him and his friends, he was an example for them. And now in his work from the other side has, I think, number one, the incident pushed me to get back into this field and to do some investigation and writing, and even, acknowledge some of my own abilities, latent abilities, which I'd never really focused on, and to give me information. I think that's actually, been given to me in a way in some of my writing through my father and my son that I wouldn't even have recognized as such until after the work was done.
Oh, so how old was your son when he departed?
Yeah, his name's Brandon, and he was 18 years old at the time. He had been hiking. He went hiking with some friends on the mountains behind our home here in Scottsdale, Arizona. And ironically, that morning before his hike, I had like a premonition. And I would rarely get anything like this, but I felt really bad about it, like it was a dangerous thing, and I asked him not to go, but he went anyhow. And it turned out that he ended up dying of a severe asthma attack. But at the time that his passing took place, no one really knew what was wrong with him, and his best friend didn't think it was asthma because the symptoms were far different. But just a few days later, my father had passed back in 1992, but my uncle had similar abilities to my father, and he gave me a message 2 days later that was very helpful. He said that my father had come to him and shared that he was there to meet my son Brandon when he crossed over and help him adjust. That initially Brandon was confused, but that my father helped him adjust, and that he had a message that he relayed that we were the best parents he ever could have had. But in addition to that, he gave the cause of death before the coroner did. So we didn't know what it was, and he had said that my father told him that Brandon's death was due to the fact that he had a lack of oxygen in his bloodstream that caused his heart to fail. And it was just 2 days after that I talked to the autopsy physician who confirmed that was true.
Wow. Is that one of the reasons why you also focus on bringing this message to other parents who have the similar experiences?
Yeah, I think the thing is it's been very rewarding to me, and I feel like my main calling is to help bereaved people, and in particular parents, because I can relate to them. And there are a lot of books by mediums out there, but, what I provide that's a little bit different is I come from a background where I had a father who is a very gifted psychic medium. I'm also a very practical and pragmatic person, so I think I'm believable. I look at it not just believing everything, but I do, test the spirits, as they would say, and I think look at it from the standpoint of I need evidence that's, I don't look at a medium as good unless I'm getting very specific messages that make sense, that fit. So I think that pragmatic standpoint is helpful, but also I've lost a child, so I understand what it feels like, and I think that they can relate to me because of that. And so I want to bring healing to them. And a woman here named Elizabeth Boyson and I have started a foundation called Helping Parents Heal. And it really started with she was holding local group meetings here in Arizona that seemed to be very helpful to parents who had been through this. And through my investigations, I kind of found there's really 4 things that help people heal from the passing of a child. One is to have a supportive family or friend network, hopefully. Another is to be able to meet with people who have been through the same thing, build friendships there. A third is eventually to heal enough to be of service to others in some way so that you have a purpose there that is fulfilling. And then the 4th thing, and sometimes most important in that, is discussion, ability to talk about and learn about evidence for the afterlife. And that's what makes our group unique, because a lot of other groups don't allow them to talk about that at all. And so through this, I saw that these parents actually got better and were healing and were progressing. And so I suggested to her that we merge and create a national organization. And so we did, and put together a website. We have a Facebook page with about 1,400 members, a newsletter, and we've got about 20 chapters across the U.S. I know we have one in Washington, D.C. I don't know how far that is from Chantilly.
No, it's nearby, and it's good to know. So what is the website in case people want to...
Yeah, they can... Actually, there's a link to it on my site. So I think you have my site on your page. And my site's markirelandauthor.com. And the organization is helpingparentsheal.info.
Okay, that's wonderful. And you said that you also heard about Allan Kardec. You actually read something on his books, right?
Yeah, I haven't read at length, but I know enough about him that he was a very highly intelligent man, and that he had studied and actually met with some mediums and documented a lot of the information that he received about the nature of the spirit world. That's my understanding. And then he shared that in his book.
Exactly. Well, Mark, we're going to give a short break. When we come back, we'd like to talk about your books, So Shift and Messages from the Afterlife, okay?
Sure.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Getting to the Light, Spiritist Therapy for Discarnate Spirits is a small book that offers guidance to Spiritist practitioners and Spiritist counselors. Purchase your copy at www.ssbaltimore.org.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
If you missed out on any previous shows, no worries. We have an on-demand section of all previous shows and interviews. Go to our website at www.kardecradio.com.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
Help prevent suicide by reading and sharing these books with others. 2 great books are available to help in this Kardec Radio campaign to prevent suicide. Suicide, All You Need to Know, by the international Spiritist speaker Richard Simonetti. You can buy your copy at www.roundtablepublishing-uk.com. Also, Memoirs of a Suicide by the medium Yvonne Pereda. Buy your copy today at www.ediceiofamerica.com.
Kardec Radio, live every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Kardec Radio now offers more programs during the week and weekends. Every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can follow the beautiful program God at Home with Francisca Kranz and the British Spiritist community. They will brighten your days by doing a God at Home meeting wherever you are in the world, while teaching you how to do the same in your own home with your family and friends. Every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you will hear incredibly inspirational Spiritist talks directly broadcasted by Spiritist Network. They will be true educational moments to carry out to immortality. Every Saturday, live interviews, Bridging Health and Spiritism with the host Dr. Vanessa Anceloni. You may ask questions to the interviewed guests by calling 858-769-4705. And every Sunday, tune in to Spiritist Awareness at Kardec Radio. You will hear a series of segments on a diversity of Spiritist topics. Kardec will broadcast the Spiritist Moment with Kirsten DeMello, the reading of the Spiritist book by John DeRosa and Steve Shepard, Spiritism in Your Life with Drs. Marco and Joyce Magalhães, Spiritism and the Gospel with Luis Sergio Marotta, Spiritist Education for Youth and Children with Bernadette Leal, Spiritist Music with James Marotta, Neuroscience and Spiritism with Dr. Vanessa Anceloni, and many more segments coming soon. Enjoy it all and nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
And now we return to our program.
We are here talking to Mark Ireland, the author, and you can go to his website, markirelandauthor.com, get to know more about his works, his books, from Soul Shift to the latest, Messages from the Afterlife. He is here with us, and we are enjoying a beautiful conversation about life in itself. Well, we are born, but sooner or later, we are going to go back to the spiritual life. Are we ready? Often, we don't want to think about it. How many people we talk about death and they're like, oh, please don't talk about it. But it's inevitable. As Franklin said, taxes and death are inevitable things. And we have to talk about it to prepare ourselves. Does it make a difference when we talk about it? When we make it more familiar? Oh, yes, it does. So let us ask, Mark, do you think by having this experience with your father, do you think the familiarity with the communications of the afterlife made it easier for you to deal with the departure of your son?
I'd say definitely, because I had already a knowledge and an understanding that there is more, whereas a lot of folks in our culture, it's a very secular culture, don't have that advantage. So that definitely makes a difference, and I think that's why one reason I feel it's so important for me to do this work, to get the information, the evidence out, so that the average person understands it, both for healing grief, but also for people that may be curious or just afraid of death. I remember giving a copy of Soul Shift to a family friend and not really knowing that much about them, and afterwards he just thanked me so much, and he said he had this horrible, terrifying fear of death, and that book helped change his thinking.
And certainly preparing us for the future. Now, in Soul Shift, you talked about your personal account on the loss of your son, and then you wrote the latest published Messages from the Afterlife. What is in this latest one that is different or complementary to the first book?
Sure. The first book started out as a catharsis, I guess you would say, and kind of my personal journey that I took after Brandon passed. And it included chapters about my meetings with some mediums, including Alison Dubois, who a lot of people have probably heard of because of the show Medium. And that's the real-life Alison Dubois on which the show is based. Also, Laurie Campbell in a lab at the University of Arizona. I was on a feature film for Discovery Channel that people can see the clip of if they go to my site. So I met with 4 different mediums, and I also recounted some personal connection experiences. One, me including a vivid dream state meeting I had with my son, and also a situation my wife had that was very compelling, in which she saw my son, Brandon, through her peripheral vision as she was sitting at the foot of our bed and felt his presence. And then confirming that the very next day, we got a call from a friend who knew nothing about Susie's experience, and he had explained an identical situation, and he had actually said out loud, "Okay, Brandon, what do you want?" So he knew that it was Brandon. So Soul Shift is basically an overview of those experiences, the meetings with the mediums, other forms of evidence that we had for Brandon's ongoing existence. And at the end of the book, I kind of recap what my feelings are, my conclusions about everything that I experienced. The new book still has some anecdotal stories and personal experiences that are evidencing the afterlife, and that's really what's in there, is evidence from various standpoints. But I also have some scholarly chapters in this book. One is called Seeing Things Differently, and it really approaches the whole subject of opening one's mind to the possibility and the evidence, because some people are just closed off to it and they think it's nonsense. So they have to question how they view the world and to come to, look at things a little bit differently. They take for granted everything they see visually or through their 5 senses as exactly as they see it or feel it, and it's not necessarily the way that it is. And we all know that there are unseen realms that are physically measured and exist, but people can't see them, touch them, or feel them, just like radio waves, things like that. So I touch on a chapter dealing with just how people perceive the world and their nature, what they think of as reality. Excuse me. Had to clear my throat there. I have another chapter on a topic that I think in this country is big because Christianity is the predominant religion in the United States, and a lot of people have been brought up with the mindset that, well, mediumship is something you shouldn't dabble in, or that it's bad in some way. So I have a chapter called Psychic Phenomena and Mediumship in Religion and History. So I try to set the record straight. I think a lot of people don't really know the Scripture and don't know the passages that talk about these phenomena, so they just make assumptions about it. And really, the only ones that are somewhat negative, for the most part, are in the Old Testament, in books such as Deuteronomy and Leviticus. But those books also say that things like slavery are okay. So I think you have to weigh that in and think about the people that wrote those particular books at that time frame and where they were coming from and the culture that they lived in. So I have a chapter to talk about that. I also have a chapter on an experiment I conducted with help from 2 researchers at the time my sister passed, back in 2006. She wrote a secret code and put it in an envelope, and no one saw it beforehand. And then we reached out to a number of mediums to see if they could relay the message after she had passed. So it's I would say it's a more educational book. I have a chapter on skeptics too, and how the difference between true skepticism, which is an open-minded inquiry, and the form of skepticism that's the debunker type, where basically it's somebody who's already made up their mind that this can't be, and then all they do is try and discredit it rather than actually read the evidence and try and understand it for themselves and then make up their own mind. So this one is really, it sets out to be an educational book for people who want to know more about it, whether they're somebody that just knows a little bit, or, I think the second book, Messages from the Afterlife, might be better for the more skeptical people. Women love Soul Shift, and I think men will like the second one maybe a little more. It's a little more pragmatic, scholarly.
That's interesting. When you talked about the Moses' prohibition on communication with the deceased, it reminds me of a passage from the Heaven and Hell book by Allan Kardec, when he tells exactly what you said about the importance of contextualizing the prohibition. And mostly he was forced into that statement because people were abusing the communication with the departed for things that were actually not very useful. They would complicate people's lives. So we would say contextualizing the nature of that prohibition would probably be the best way to go. As you also said, we can't go literal in the words without understanding where Moses was coming from when he had to bring forth that understanding that we should be careful. And we should, right, Mark? Because in your experience researching consciousness survival, you probably came across experiences, or you've heard about people, mediums, who are actually fraudulent.
Yes. In fact, the new book has a chapter on that and how to avoid that, because we have a now good friend who came to us. A psychologist had referred her to talk to us because her and her husband had just lost their son, and he had drowned in a lake accident. And so she talked to us, and we explained that we found a lot of healing in meeting with some mediums. And we told her we'd refer her to some of the ones we knew and trusted, but she was too impatient, and she was driving by like a storefront and saw a sign for a psychic, and she went in there, and the psychic collected money from her and then told her that her son hadn't crossed over, that he was being held by her mother-in-law, who was an evil person, and but that if she would come back and give her $400, she could lift this curse. So that just disgusted me to hear that. And so I think even back then in the Old Testament times, that fraud was a concern. And so I think it's a despicable thing, and it hurts the field very much. And so folks, need to be on guard. They need to understand, if you want to have a reading, you need to make sure that you're connecting with someone who is truly gifted and is coming from a higher place. And so you don't just do that by looking in the phone book or whatever. There are ways, and it's usually through reference, that you're going to find good people. Otherwise, there are resources that do testing on them and certify mediums, like the Windbridge Institute or the Forever Family Foundation and some others. And I gladly share a list of mediums with people when they reach out to me, too.
Okay. And as Marcus D. Clay from Toronto, Canada. Hi, Marcus. Thank you so much for being at Kardec Radio today. He's sharing with us his comment on this passage about Moses. He says, we have a selective way of interpreting the scriptures also, where Moses condemns mediumship in Deuteronomy 18. He also proves it for those who know how to use it, and that's in Numbers 11:27 about Eldad and Medad. Thank you so much, Marcus, for reminding us of it. And thank you also, Rachel Lady, for being here and saying that it's your first time with us at Kardec Radio. We hope you enjoy and come back always. Mark, we are talking about being familiar also with the communications with the beyond. When you researched this aspect of communications, do you see patterns? We know often people want to communicate with the loved ones who departed, but sometimes they are not able to communicate. So have you observed such occurrences as well?
A little bit, but I've had pretty good success. Most of the meetings that I've gone to have done a great job, and I've even, started learning how to pick up some messages myself, and I've done some test readings for friends and other people, and it's kind of surprised myself. But after doing that, it gives me a better understanding of why there could be miscommunications, because mediums, and I have a chapter in the new book, Messages, in regard to how mediums get the information. And it's a little bit different for each of them. Some of them it's more visual images, visions. Some of it's more auditory, like they'll hear names or things. Others may feel it or sense it. So, in my case where I've done the tests on myself with other friends, I get kind of like a visualization and then a feeling. But sometimes you might see a picture of something in your mind, and then if you just said what it is, it may make sense to them, it may not. So I think sometimes it could be the nature of the information that's coming through, and it requires some sort of interpretation. As an example, when I was doing a test for this one friend, I saw a picture of exhaust headers. I don't even know if you know what those are, but they're on an engine, on a race car engine. So I knew that it was something to do with a race car. So I said, I don't know why I'm seeing these exhaust headers, but I know that those go on a race car, and so it must be to do with a race car. And it had turned out that a good friend of hers, they were supposed to go see him. He raced cars, and they were supposed to see him on a Sunday, but he crashed on a Saturday. So I think sometimes it's just the information it's not like you and I talking. It could be, I guess, maybe for my dad, because it seems so specific for him, but a lot of the mediums, they're getting a picture or an image or a feeling, and then it has to be deciphered or explained. And if they make the wrong interpretation of it, that could lead to a misunderstanding.
Yes, there are certainly levels of mediumship development, mediums such like your father or like Chico Xavier in Brazil, who were very precise, very specific. They could see the whole picture. But for most of the mediums nowadays, it seems that it becomes a little bit less clear, but it depends on their own refinement to really develop. So Kardec also talks about the fact that mediumship is so organic that once you have it in your family, it's most likely that other members of the family also have mediumship. So you talked about your father, your uncle, and in your book you also talk about intuition. How about your mediumistic abilities?
Well, it's like I said before, it's something I had ignored, not really paid attention to. So even if it's there organically, if you don't nurture something, it's not going to grow, or you don't recognize it. And I think for me, it's only now, at this stage of my life, that I'm starting to recognize it a little bit more. In years past, it would be very sporadic. Something might come to me, just out of the blue, and it would turn out to be correct, and I'd kind of chuckle about it or something like. But I find if there's if I put a focused intent on it and try and quiet my mind, that I'm able to get things. I can't say that I'm anywhere near my dad's level, though. I don't know that I was intended to be. I think maybe my role's a little bit different than his. But I do have seen definitely instances of it. A really funny one was, I think a month ago, my wife was in the living room and I was in our den, and I was on the computer. She said, do you want to watch a football game? And I said, well, maybe in a little bit. And then she said, oh, you should see the score of this Florida State, I forget who they were playing, Florida State Wake Forest game. And I said, what, 59-3 or something like that. I can't remember what I said, or 59-13. And she said, no, it's 42 to whatever, and 42-0 or something. Well, it ended up being that the score that I blurted out ended up being the final score. So it was kind of a precognitive thing, but it was a really unimportant thing. But that's often how I found it could work with me, is just something will come. I had, when I was a teenager, I was dating a girl, and I had a dream one night that she was seeing another guy, and it made me jealous. So I told her about it the next day. And I said, well, it's probably just a dream. And she goes, no, tell me more. And I said, well, the funny thing is I know his first and last name, and I know what he looks like. And I said, his name is Bob Dooley, and he looks like blah, blah, blah. And she says, I used to date a guy named Bob Dooley in Kansas, and he looked exactly like that. So I've had these experiences, but they've been, I guess I'd say undeveloped. So now I'm working on it a little bit more. I can't say that I'm completely dedicated to it full time because I've got a full plate, but I do think it runs in families, and most of the people that do this sort of research would concur with that.
So here we have at Blog Talk Radio Chat Room at Kardec Radio, Marcos D. Clay and Rachel Lady sharing their ideas, and Rachel is sharing that when her dad passed away, she actually had a clear auditory experience regarding his presence, and she says you need to have an open heart, and it's a matter of interpretation. And at the end, she says, because she had a highly programmed religious childhood, she had to work very hard to release the fear. So,
right.
Can you tell us more about this fear that people have to access their open heart and mind?
Well, in my dad's book, Your Psychic Potential, he actually talks about this at length because there's several types of fear that will interfere with the ability of the psychic and mediumship abilities. One type of fear is this pre-programmed religious fear, and it's a fear that either that this is something unknown and shouldn't be dabbled in, or that it's wrong or evil in some way. But the reality is, as I see it, and my father saw it, a lot of them, what are called miracles in the Bible, are actually these phenomena at work. So other forms of fear are fear of judgment, societal judgment, like, well, hey, if I say I do this, people think I'm crazy or something like that. So these fears hinder your ability, because when you want to develop and you want to receive messages and information, you need a completely still, quiet mind that is not caught up in an analytical thought process or tied up in any fear. It needs to be. You need to assume an objective perspective. So you're just sitting there observing. You're relaxed, observing, and you're not thinking about any of these kinds of emotional things or carrying any emotional baggage. Otherwise, you can't be a clear receptor.
Yes, you're right. So it's a journey for sure. Mark, we're gonna give a last break, but when we come back, we'd like to talk about a very specific experience you had with your father and his relationship with your grandfather, his father, before we end the program, okay?
Sure.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Books of Andre Luis. Through the hands of the most prolific medium of all times, Chico Javier, the spirit doctor Andre Luis wrote a series of books that unveil the mechanisms of life and life after life. From the best-selling novel No Solar, Our Home, to And Life Goes On, the reader will find illumination for a fulfilled life on Earth as well as immortal happiness. Check the many titles available at the international distributor, EDI CEI of America. Their website is www.ediceiofamerica.com.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
Spiritist Network, your gateway to on-demand Spiritist videos. www.spiritistnetwork.com.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio. Traveling to another country? Immigrating elsewhere? Prepare yourself by reading the book Among Brothers of Other Lands, in which several loving and wise spirits wrote through the hands of Chico Xavier and Waldo Vieira, telling all of us the tips and hints of a successful transition to a new land. Buy your copy today at www.ediceiofamerica.com.
Do you want Spiritist books for your children? At Edicei of America, you'll find a collection of them, from the best-selling book Our Father, in which the Spirit Mei Mei, through Chico Xavier, brought countless poems, stories and folk tales based on the Lord's Prayer, to the beautiful and educational collection by the author Edwina Haddad on Back to School and many others. Buy your copy today at www.adasaofamerica.com.
And now we return to our program.
Dear listener, we're in the last third of our program today, and we are talking to Mark Ireland, the author of books such as Soul Shift, Messages from the Afterlife. And we're discussing beautiful accounts from his own experience to his father's, and also accounts that are happening, in the lives of all of us around. We're discussing here the fact that some people have a hard time embracing the fact that life goes on and death is just a natural thing because of some religious limitations, and we need to release that fear. Mark, before we talk about your experience with your father, we also have a listener here who would like to ask a question. But before we open the line for the listener, we'd like to discuss with you a case from the book Heaven and Hell by Allan Kardec. It's Bernardin. It's a 3-minute audio file. We're going to listen and discuss it with you, okay?
Okay.
An excerpt from Heaven and Hell. Bernardin, Bordeaux, April 1862.
I am a spirit who has been forgotten for many centuries. I lived upon the earth in poverty and disgrace. I toiled unremittingly to earn, each day, a morsel of bread for my family. But I loved him whom I regarded as my veritable master. And when my load of suffering was added to by him whom was my master upon the earth, I used to say, My God, give me the strength to bear up under this load without complaining. I was thus expiating an evil past. But when I came forth from this great trial, my true master received me into his peace. And now my most earnest desire is to say to you all, men, my brethren, whatever price you have to pay for your purification, the happiness that awaits you will amply overpay it. I had no regular trade. I was one of a numerous family of children, and I was at the service of anyone who could help me to get my livelihood. Born at a period in which all servants were hardly and cruelly treated, I endured all the injustice, all the enforced labor, all the grinding and robbing that the subalterns of my owner chose to inflict upon me. I saw my wife outraged, my daughters carried away and then cast off without being able to utter a complaint. I saw my sons torn from me and forced to fight in wars for pillage and for every crime, and hung for faults they had not committed. Ah, friends, if you only knew what I had to endure in that long and wretched life. But I was sustained by the hope of a happiness not of the earth, and my hope was fulfilled. I have a right to say to you, brothers, courage, patience, resignation. My child, preserve what I have written. It is a practical teaching. He who preaches is much more attentively listened to when he can say, I have borne more than you have to bear. I have borne without complaining.
At what period did you live down here?
From 1400 to 1460.
Have you had another earthly existence since then?
Yes, I have lived among you as a missionary of the faith, of the true and pure faith, of the faith that comes from God, not that which men have made for you.
Have you, as a spirit, any occupations?
Can you imagine that spirits remain inactive? Inaction, uselessness, would be torture for them. My mission is to lead the workmen of the great industrial centers to Spiritism. I inspire them with good thoughts and endeavor to neutralize those that backward spirits try to suggest to them.
So, Mark, this is a very peculiar case because it talks about someone who lived like a long time ago and shares his experience, and now tells us about not an unfinished business, but being around to help people. In your experience, how much of that have you also encountered?
Well, I think part of what comes out of the excerpt you played is just the whole idea of human suffering, and that everyone suffers to some degree and some inordinate amounts more. But then you'd ask, well, why is that? And I think if I was, from my perspective, it's about the refinement of our soul and our being to become more than we are, and to become more fulfilled in being all we can be. And so with a negative experience, or something we would consider as negative or painful or suffering, it does make us more compassionate, or it can if we allow it to, and more understanding. So I think, just not contrasting my situation with his, but by losing a child or having a child die at a young age and transition on, it softens me. It makes me understand what it's like to go through that experience. So if someone else were to go through an experience of being mistreated or being a servant or something, well, they would have empathy for people going through similar experiences. So I would just say, from my perspective, it's about the growth of the soul. And so some of the experiences that are difficult probably provide the most growth for us.
Mm-hmm. And what about the spirit communications that of those who want to help us? Sometimes it's about what they experience here and the validation and comforting their family members, but sometimes it's about like protector spirits. Have you also come across such type of communications?
I have. Even going back to my father's work, he did deep trance mediumship for 30 years, and the guides that he had were, in addition to doing the type of mediumship that was giving people messages to help them cope with grief or to know that they were being led down the right path, a lot of it was instructive. It was teachings that were explaining the nature of life and the purpose of life and where people were going and how to live. So I'd seen that in my dad's work, but then in terms of some of the messages that have come through to me too, I could tell it was talking about a higher purpose to the work that I was doing and where I was going. It wasn't just about evidence, to make me feel good. It was about what I needed to stay on my path and for me to grow and to help other folks along the way.
So, Mark, we have here two listeners, Patty and Tina. They would like to talk to you. We're going to open the line for Patty. Hi, Patty. Thank you so much for being at Kardec Radio today.
Oh, yes. This is great. Well, I have been in, a spiritual life. I've been a medium for a long time. So this is great.
Great.
I really feel like this is a great conversation for someone, because a lot of things are coming up for me that I don't understand, different dimensions that are coming in, and I feel like I'm looking at different beings, almost like Palladians, which I have never met before. So it's real interesting. I just wondered if you have had the same kind of, I feel like an acceleration, but I also feel like I don't understand. It's not very clear yet what I am being kind of introduced to on a new spiritual level, So I don't know if it's just something. I feel like I feel it, and then I know it's there, and then I learn about it after. That seems to be just the way it happens for me. So I don't know if that's been happening for anyone else who's in the spiritual realms, if they've been introduced to new beings. So I just wondered about that.
Thank you for asking this, Mark. Would you like to address it?
Yeah, I don't know in terms of beings per se, but in terms of life change and path, what I've found is that sometimes when I feel like something's happening or supposed to happen, then I might part of me gets impatient and I'm wanting to see what it's going to be or where I'm supposed to go or what I'm supposed to do. But because I just feel this change coming on, or I've been told by other mediums, about things that are unfolding. But what I've resolved to is just to relax and not worry so much about that and just let that process happen naturally. And so as long as I'm on my path and I know that I am, and the way that I know that I am is that things tend to work out and things tend to go in the right direction. And I feel content. If I don't feel that way and things aren't working out, then I might take a step back and ask, well, okay, what am I doing here? How do I get back on my path? But I think I've just, in a broader sense, I don't worry so much about finding out exactly what I'm supposed to do or exactly when. I just let it unfold because I know that there's a plan, and as long as I stay on my path, that plan will be fulfilled.
Yeah. It's interesting. Also, Mark saying how natural, because it goes hand in hand with Kardec's teachings. Patty, if you also go, I just would like to compliment and share this resource with you. If you go to the Medium's book, there is a chapter entitled Identity of Spirits, and there you can find more about the identification of those whom you're perceiving, their presence as well. That can be also of help to you.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. I will go on your website to find this.
Well, you can go to, if you Google the Medium's book by Kardec, you can find publishers. In the United States, we have Odyssey of America, which actually sells the book, or at Amazon.com you can find the book as well. And the book, Medium's book by Allan Kardec, is also a good reference in regards to describing the identification of spirits. Okay?
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Patty. So, Mark, now Tina probably lost communication with her. She was asking this question about where do the dead go? I know you have a book about this because it's the subtitle of your first book, Soul Shift, right, Mark?
Yeah, the title was Soul Shift, Finding Where the Dead Go, and the reason we had that subtitle is because my publisher insisted on it. I wasn't really crazy about it, but, I would say I can't tell you where, like there's a physical place. I think it's another dimensional reality that may parallel or overlap ours. If anyone's read a little bit about quantum physics, quantum mechanics, you come to understand that everything that makes up the physical world is nothing but energy and vibration. And at the subatomic level, the particles that make up matter, below that there's a lot of speculation that they're not even particles at all. And some of these electrons come in and out of existence. So my feeling is that there are other layers of dimensional realities that are all around us. And so our consciousness exists in these other realms, and when we transition, we're occupying another realm or reality. So I don't know that I suppose, we think of everything in a three-dimensional world, space kind of thing, but because that's the frame of reference we have in this world. But I think it's probably, I would characterize it as a dimensional reality is more free, malleable, flexible, and where your mind and your thoughts are more instantaneously reflected in your surroundings. Even in this world, it's known through research in quantum mechanics that the objects that you interact with and view or look at actually come into existence as a result of your observation of them. Electrons don't assume a position until observed. This has been proven through a double slit experiment. So anyone wants to know more about it, Google the double slit experiment, and you'll learn that is. So the bottom line of this is that mind comes first, and matter is a byproduct of mind. So if you leave this world of matter, you're left with mind. So I think mind in the next realm has a lot more freedom, and those dimensions are probably more malleable.
That's so interesting. Thank you for sharing that reference as well. Now, finally, we come across a very peculiar experience. It's about your father and your grandfather. Can you tell us about a particular occasion that happened when your grandfather was on his deathbed?
Yeah, now my grandfather never really embraced my father's gifts. He was embarrassed by it. Now, he knew it was real, but he really didn't like it. And they lived in a small town in Ohio, and my grandfather just wanted him to be quiet, my father to be quiet and not share these things. But then I think it was 1962, my grandfather contracted cancer, and he was dying. And my father, even though they'd not gotten along, my father obviously didn't want him to be afraid of dying. And so he wrote him a letter. Now, my uncle said that when my uncle was in the hospital with my grandfather, that my grandfather repeatedly asked, "Hey, will you please read me Dick's letter?" So my father, Richard, they called him Dick. "Would you read Dick's letter?" And he read it again and again and again. So it's long, so I won't read the whole thing, but I'm going to read a little bit of it so you get the flavor for it.
Okay.
And it says, life and death are extremely personal and therefore difficult to talk about, especially to those who are close to us. We can all speculate on death. Almost everyone has. The doctor, that the body is all there is. The scientist, that nothing is ever lost, just changed in form. And the most comforting, the minister, that the soul is the real you and the body is only a mode of manifestation in the physical world. And when it is no longer a fit habitat for the soul withdraws and leaves an empty shell. I don't mean to minister to you, for how can a son minister to a father? It's only that I want you to know, as I know, that the minister is right. I have no means to convey to you the experiences I have had with life after death, but it's real to me. I couldn't teach others to believe something I didn't know or was in doubt about. I didn't get my proof through any school or someone else. Not even the logic of man's survival satisfied me. By some grace of God, I was privileged to know for myself by actually talking with and seeing those who have graduated into a higher school of life. That is my personal proof, and it has been proof to thousands of others, mostly strangers to me, who have come and received personal proof about those they once loved, and by conveyance of facts known only to them, they have been convinced. When a new baby is born, it comes out from the great nowhere into the great somewhere. And when the soul is born into another stage of life through death, it returns to that great gulf from which it came. I know whenever you stand at that point just between the two worlds, for a moment you'll know that everything is all right. When you begin to see with the side of the soul or spirit, even before you leave the body, you'll see I'm right. When Aunt Ellie, Grandma Birch, and especially your own dad become clearly visible, you'll be too anxious to join them to even think about the worn-out body you'll be leaving behind. And then you'll realize that you left behind 4 sons to carry on the job of living rightly raised and ready to help the world be a better place for our sons to live. Have no regrets of the past, Dad. And just remember, I'll be seeing you again, here or there. It makes no difference. I can't make the trip with you, but I know it will be a pleasant one. Take my love and hellos to all my friends, and don't forget to come and visit me. You promised. Love, your son, Dick.
Wow. We thank you so much for sharing this, and it really is truly moving, and it wraps up this conversation in the highest tone, which is the tone of love. We thank you so much, Mark, for bringing so much love, compassion, and caring for us, and hope mostly. For all of us who are listening to you here at Kardec Radio, we hope to have you here more often, okay?
Great. It would be wonderful to come back, and I appreciated being on today.
Thank you so much. Dear listener, how moving is this? And what a genius mind. Because imagine yourself when your loved one is departing. A great way to talk to somebody's heart and not refrain from actually experiencing this. So go to his book, Messages from the Afterlife, markirelandauthor.com, and get to know more about it. We apologize for Rachel Lady, who is in Australia, chatting here at Kardec Radio, Blog Talk Radio chat room. we're not going to be able to address your question, but we would say go to the Medium's book by Allan Kardec, and you'll find information regarding your question. Be in touch with us. Dear listener, right now we're going to wrap up with a beautiful prayer, as we always do. A beautiful prayer sharing our gratitude for these moments, for having Mark Arland here with Kardec Radio, for the work he has been doing, illuminating our humanity with these accounts, helping awaken the humanity in all of us, for the reality that we are. We're spirits. We are immortal spirits. Let us then calm our minds, attune our hearts to one another, raising our thoughts to our dear loving God, the Father, Mother of all of us. Dear God, how can we ever express our gratitude for the blessings of life, if not by the efforts we make to multiply the resources and the talents you have given us, and improving ourselves always. May spirit communication serve its purpose to console, comfort, bring hope, but mostly to boost our inner transformation, knowing that the more we manage our own attitude in life, the more we refine ourselves, the better it is for all of us. And thus, we're doing our will on earth as it is in heaven. We'd like to thank you for sending our protector spirits, who inevitably and unconditionally guide our pathways. May everyone who is listening to this program feel this shower of healing light, renew their hopes, bring them new perspectives, and would like to thank specially for the presence of Richard Arland and his son Mark Arland in our lives, giving us an opportunity to expand the reality of our own selves. And so be it. Dear listener, we hope you have enjoyed. We have our Spiritist Awareness program tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't miss it. But if you do, don't forget, we're always on iTunes. All programs become podcasts that you can catch up and listen on demand at your leisure, or at KardecRadio.com. Go there, click on Blog Talk Radio, check room, the shows in the Blog Talk Radio room for Kardec Radio, and listen to the programs since the beginning in July 2011. Great programs to date. You can follow through these ideas, discussions, great opportunities for us to really nourish our souls wherever you are in this world. We'll see you in a week. We're going to be here live next week with a new program. We're going to talk about the end of death with the author of the book, The End of Death, Admir Serrano. Don't miss it. It's an opportunity for us to be together and rejoice, because life really goes on. Many blessings.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.